Eddie Mannix is one of those people who came from absolutely nothing, but was born at just the right time to shoot up from nothing to help run and orchestrate the ins and outs of the new Hollywood system pretty much in its infancy.
Like all of them.
Like all of them. Like saying he came from nothing in that period of movie history doesn't mean anything because all the original studio heads were ruthless, greedy nobodies who became royalty and ran Dreamland.
The aristocracy that Louis B. Mayer came from. Yeah. Oh, what the proud Mayer family.
We had a debut ball for Louis B. Mayer. These men who were ruthless nobodies who became rich overnight because they had run Nickelodeons and all of a sudden were running Nickelodeon.
Did Nickelodeon have a fixer?
They had a fixer, yeah.
Whenever Tommy Pickle...
He's covered in slime.
You gotta get down here. I got slimed again.
I got slimed
Eddie, you
again.
Gotta get here.
You gotta clean up all the slime. She slimed so much. There's slime all over the place. You gotta scrub
Rocco was there. The big heads were not. They didn't want to be a part of it. The angry beavers, boy, they lived up to their name.
But these old awful men who were all criminals, all committed crimes, are remembered so fondly. The old Hollywood era is remembered so fondly, and they invented a chunk of this city's history. So we gotta cover it. I tried to initially start talking about Eddie Mannix with he was already a studio guy, and I was like, no, I have to show you the path of how he got there because he's a thug who was promoted to the general manager of MGM.
I didn't know that he was a bad guy. I mean, I guess you can't be a good guy and do the sort of things he did.
But when I first talked about him, I sort of associated him with the wolf from Pulp Fiction.
I was just going to bring him up. Yeah,
I come in and I clean problems, and people are like, yeah, you're a hero.
Or Ray Donovan.
But that's like the romanticization of Davy Crockett as opposed to what Davy Crockett was really like.
Or the romanticization of everybody who ran America for the first 200
I
years.
Forgot about that.
230 years?
Let's put him on a dollar bill. Okay, so from the beginning...
They were all fixers.
So from the beginning, as briefly as possible, on the East Coast, Thomas Edison created a camera that would capture motion pictures.
Oh boy, we were really going to the beginning.
You have to understand why Hollywood happened. He creates a camera that can capture motion pictures, the kinetograph. This was in the 1890s, and he had a stranglehold on the invention.
Eddie Mannix gets that. He wasn't strangling her. He was holding her.
She turned purple from excitement. He took her breath away.
Clark Gable will take your breath away if you cross him.
If you have your back turned to him. Along with his assistant, William Kennedy Dixon, the two went on to develop and patent the Kinetoscope movie viewer. This is obviously the great-grandfather of our movie viewing experience. And while they couldn't yet sync motion pictures to sound, they could film actions in motion and were able to project them to be viewed. Soon they opened up their own studio in New Jersey. Black Maria, which is also the name of the caravan, would come and pick you up if you were dying. When Edison saw competition arise, he created a group, the Edison Trust, of companies who own patents needed to make a movie. Like Eastman Kodak was part of this trust. Any element you needed to make a movie, there was a patent stranglehold on it, so you couldn't make a movie or you had to pay these guys a lot of money. So this was, like I said, just to outprice everybody. So even from the humble beginnings, the movie studio system was ruthless. Well, I guess we're not going to make movies without infringing on the patent. Or we can go so far away that Edison wouldn't know what we're up to, or it would take him a really long time to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what people did. So movie makers in the early 20th century traded the Atlantic, which we all agree sucked a butt, for the Pacific, best coast is the west coast, and started making movies out of Edison's reach. You know this already. Maybe not everybody knows this.
I think we covered this extensively in every episode we've done.
This is our prologue for every episode. This is our new intro.
This is our crawl. It was the Emperor is back.
Oh, by the way, the Emperor's back.
The Emperor is back, and there's gonna be some trouble. That's how Rise of
Pew pew pew. The Emperor's back,
which might be a song I'm going to be talking about later.
So William Selig starts Selig Studios around 1908. D.W. Griffith starts Biograph Studios in 1910, and between 1910 and 1913, a bunch of other independent movie studios open up, mostly in Edendale, which is adjacent to Echo Park. This includes Bison Studios, New York Moving Pictures Company, Norberg Pictures, and Mack Sennett's Keystone Studio.
The Keystone Cops?
Keystone Cops.
Oh, okay. Because Melissa was asking me about the Keystone Cops yesterday.
Yeah.
Because I pulled another gun on a sheriff. But
I dropped some pianos down the stairs, so she had a lot of questions about that.
Those two were not cops. You know very well those were criminals.
They had stripes on. You know that.
She was asking me why they were called Keystone, and I didn't know, but I guess they just worked cops for Keystone.
Cops from the Keystone Film Company.
All right.
I imagine
that's a letdown, but
it might, like, maybe the studio's named after the type of cop. I don't know. So, okay, let's get back to the dank, stinky old East Coast. Two young Russian immigrant brothers raised on the Lower East Side opened an amusement park called Paradise Park. They started with a little beer stand at a popular trolley stop, and in 1906, they were able to afford an amusement park at that spot. The brothers were Nick and Joe I've heard people say skank. It looks like it's pronounced shank. Either one is bad, but I'm going to say skank. Sometime in 1911, Nick Shank. No, sorry. I already did that. Sometime I spell it so different. Okay. Sometime in 1911, Nick Skank met a young man who was a frequent visitor to the park, and this young man keeps being described as barrel-chested, which makes me think of King Kong. No, not King Kong. Well, King Kong a little bit. Donkey
Joe
Kong.
Young?
This makes me think of Donkey Kong. This young man was...
And he loved picking up barrels of pickles, and he was throwing them at all the Italians that lived around there.
Lots of barrels at that time, all full of alcohol. He supported prohibition. This young man was Eddie Mannix.
Yeah, Donkey Kong just didn't want people getting drunk.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong was so religious.
Oh my God, what was it?
Staunch supporter of the 13th Amendment, or not the 13th, whatever.
19th Amendment.
You knew that a little too well.
Anyways, Eddie Mannix was from Fort Lee, New Jersey. He was around 20 years old when he met Nick Skank. There really isn't a lot.
It sounds like you're describing Tony Soprano.
Oh no. This is his picture. It's James Gandolfini.
Your notes are like one of those, all the words are shaped into a profile of James Gandolfini.
This is the part where I have to sing Bob Dylan. Like I was saying, there isn't a lot known about the early years. He was Irish. He was from New Jersey. He dropped out of school, but when he was in school, people from high school used to call him Bulldog. Yikes. Anyone named Bulldog is like, unless it's a joke and he's really skinny, stay away from Bulldog.
Bulldog and Shank.
Reports vary. Some say he was given a job right from the start working at a ticket booth. Others say he started as one of the hundreds of tradesmen and handyman around Paradise Park, or the Shanks started a new park, Palisades Park. So he either worked both of them or was a construction person at Palisades Park. But either way, Mannix did more than just take tickets or hammer nails for the Skanks. He was soon promoted to bookkeeper until the IRS caught wind of him working the books, and he got demoted back to bouncer enforcer, which is what he was. I mean, he was good at, honestly, like, it's weird. I don't like Eddie Mannix. He was kind of good at everything, though. He was good at what he had to do. Like, he's one of these.
He did some good. Hitler built the Autobahn.
Good as in the Great Depression. Hitler built the Autobahn. Check out that Volkswagen. Okay, so he was a booker enforcer after he was working the books, which is an absolute requirement for a New York amusement park in the 1910s. No matter what task the brothers needed him for, Eddie was up for it. And while he was technically their assistant, what he really was their right-hand man. A title much more telling than an assistant.
It's like Hellboy's right hand.
Yes, exactly. I get that. I know exactly what you're talking about. So you might trust an assistant, but a right-hand man knows all your secrets. If you've read any good Dashiell Hammett stories, the right-hand man is the one you're scared of the most.
And you should suspect when the boss gets murdered.
Yeah, it's almost like the boss is just a shade more incompetent than the right-hand man. Another incredibly important relationship to the Skanks is made around this time with a man who was running Nickelodeons and arcades in Paradise Park. This man was Marcus Lowell, future owner of Lowell's Theaters. Yeah. Lowell and the brothers went into business together.
And Lowell's housing warehouse.
That's right, and he's that Lowell too. Yeah. After we did stand up for the first time, we sat in rocking chairs and Lowell's and decompressed.
Yeah, and then shortly after, I think the Christopher Dorner thing happened, and like he took people hostage in that Lowe's, or like they thought he was in that Lowe's.
I think so. Yeah. They thought he was in that Lowe's.
We're just steeped in LA history, you and I.
We just can't
First
help
time
it.
we did comedy, the Dorner, Lowe's.
You eat the Munchbox. It's got a bunch of swastikas carved in the table.
I ate there with Charles Manson. That's what I forgot to mention.
I was tuning his guitar because he didn't really know how to do it, and he kept saying stuff about God. I don't know.
And I said, "Can you just play the Monkees theme song again?"
It's pretty good.
Hey, we're the Mansons.
Just mansing around. Lol.
We're too busy race warring.
They were not good at race warring.
But they were busy at it. Say what you will about Manson, but he was busy.
That guy, he was a family man. So Marcus Lowell and the brothers go into business together, helping finance each other's ventures. The brothers went to work for his growing theater chain, and they acquired 2 Lowell's movie houses along the way, all while still running the park. So, of course, Eddie Mannix took over managing Palisades Park when the brothers were otherwise occupied. The Skanks and Lowell shared profits and began a pattern of reinvesting in real estate for Nickelodeons, vaudeville theaters, and later motion picture production. Joe Skank started making movies in 1913 after meeting Evelyn Nesbit, who's Evelyn. I don't know if you know, but Evelyn Nesbit is considered like, I'm sure you've seen her photo before. It's like she's like the first pinup. What some consider the first supermodel.
I don't look at that sort of stuff.
You're right, and she's the woman at the center of one of the many crimes of the century. He met her on a boat and was like, "I want to make movies with you."
Who? What crime?
No, her husband shot her lover, and it was a big deal at the time. All right. I mean, like, that didn't happen before.
It's no Manson murder, but okay.
What did they write on the wall?
What did you do with the blood?
To whom it may concern. Old timey. So Joe Studio Comic Studio, spelled kind of Comique, much be comique, was run out of a grimy warehouse at 48th and 1st and managed by Eddie Mannix. So you can see how, like, they just kept, like, giving, like, this thug who was good at conning people, they just kept giving him, like, promotions. And he kept, like, showing up. He shows up. Like, he shows up and does the work.
Say what you will about Eddie Mannix.
He shows up and he does the work.
He's a hard worker.
Around this time, Eddie got married to a woman named Bernice Frumis. So he gets married to Bernice, and because he was a lecherous dog having affairs, he was happily living a life already at that point well above the promise of his upbringing. And he's technically still a nobody as opposed to what's going to come, and he's already happy at this point. That was going to change, obviously. By 1919, Marcus Lowe had 60 movie theaters and vaudeville theaters, and while Joe Skank ran talent booking offices, we kind of know what that means, Nick ran theater operations. Around this time, we should introduce another Russian-born young man who was raised salvaging scrap in his dad's business. Raised in Boston, he started a little Nickelodeon and soon owned a large empire of movie theaters in New England. This was Louis B. Mayer. He moved to Los Angeles to increase the supply of motion pictures for his theater. He opened up Louis B. Mayer Productions and Metro Pictures Corporation, which he opened with Richard Rowland and George Crombacher. This is a lot of names and a lot of movie history. We're getting to the good stuff, I swear, but I need this. I need you to understand. I need you to
understand. I took a film class once in college.
I've seen movies in black and white. You won't believe it. There's only two colors. Well, in 1919, Marcus Lowe bought Metro Pictures, and in 1924, orchestrated the merger of Metro Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures, which he also bought, and Louis B. Mayer Productions, and formally established MGM Studios, which he would run on the West Coast on the Goldwyn's lot in Culver City. Okay. This was the formation of MGM. Louis B. Mayer was made the head of the studio operations, and under his wing was the boy wonder Irving Thalberg. So these are all the names are starting to come together now. Yeah. Through the merger, MGM now...
All these old Jewish gangster street toughs, they're all coming together.
We're also going to marry Marilyn Monroe. Like, that's the wildest thing. It's like, I'm an ugly nobody who's rich, and I'm going to marry the biggest movie star on the planet. And then from day one, going to be cheating on her with a bunch of nobodies.
Ought to be alive in the 30s. Ought to be as ugly as I am in the 30s.
In the 30s, owning a Nickelodeon. So through the merger, MGM now held some of the biggest talent in the game at the time. Lon Chaney, John Gilbert, Marion Davies, Norma Shearer, Roman Navarro, Buster Keaton. Behind the camera, they had Fred Niblo, Victor Glemming, King Vidor, and Woodbridge, Strong Van Dyke, nicknamed One Take Van Dyke, which sounds like a put down, but he also filmed The Thin Man in 18 Days, so you can call him whatever you want. That's great. The Shanks were now the boss of Louis B. Mayer, and this thrust Eddie Mannix not only into a management position of a very lucrative business, it's also put him in a key spot to be the eyes and the ears of the new entertainment industry. So now there's two essential things about understanding this. The Skanks in business with Lowell did not like or trust Louis B. Mayer, and because Nick Skank hated the West Coast and refused to move out there to do business, he sent his most trustworthy man out to LA to be their surrogate, their satellite, and that was, of course, Eddie Mannix. Mannix was now assigned to keep an eye on Mayer. So he has two jobs, basically. He's the assistant to Irving Thalberg, and he was formerly being employed as a finance comptroller of MGM in 1924. Those are his kind of like two titles. Bernice and Eddie then move out to Hollywood that year into Buster Keaton's old house in the middle of the 20s. One of the most wild, explosive.
Is it the house that fell on
It's the house that fell. It only has 3 walls. Yeah.
But it's beautiful. The foundation is beautiful.
Don't pull the door too hard.
Unless you can pull that stunt off.
Unless you were raised in like a circus or whatever crazy thing. So here's Eddie Mannix. Like I was saying, Eddie Mannix, a street smart thug with connections to the mob, is now moving to 1920s Los Angeles, one of the most explosive, wild, modern times that we look back on. A drinker, a gambler, a womanizing thug, as I said, with power, now moving to Crime City.
Toker.
And a midnight. Woo-hoo. And while he was never faithful to Bernice in New York, now Eddie Mannix would be surrounded by beautiful dames every day, and now in a position of power, he can abuse that position at every opportunity if he chose to, and he usually chose to.
Eddie Mannix didn't show restraint? No.
A thug with power? Why wouldn't he show restraint?
The human Donkey Kong? No, Greg, no.
And not helping this particular situation was the fact that while Nick Skank distrusted Louis B. Mayer, Mayer and Mannix got along swell. These two guys would just be abusing power, and nobody, there's almost no checks and balances. Like nobody was checking each other.
It's all checks.
Yeah.
It's that they're writing to each other.
They're writing to each other. Apparently, I don't know what this was about, but Mayer knocked Eddie out with one punch, and instead of ripping him apart limb by limb like a wild chimp, It's said that Mayer earned Eddie's undying respect.
So that actually happens in real life?
I guess so. You either get your head ripped off, bare hands, or you earn respect.
Yeah, the bully is now the good guy.
No. From his history of creative, problematic problem solving with the Skanks, Eddie Mannix knew how to solve problems and keep it hush-hush. Those were the two things he was good at. Along with another MGM employee, the gentlemanly Howard Strickling, as I brought up before, the two men would be the studio fixers. While Strickling fixed studio and talent issues through publicity, Mannix had a much more hands-on approach. They learned from earlier scandals how to work it. Like Fatty Arbuckle was a scandal that they weren't really involved in. Olive Thomas, I think, overdosed. Mary Pickford, I think. Okay.
Too many chili dogs. I keep Mary Pickford in for next month's episode.
We'll see if we make it that far.
Don't worry.
But these,
I plan on getting COVID again.
But the Fatty Arbuckle thing was really an example to the boy, like a template of how to fix problems. Like, don't let this happen to your studio because it crushed your main star. Like everything fell apart because of that scandal.
Yeah. Fatty Arbuckle died for our sins.
Exactly. So don't let that happen to us. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the bigger scandals. They obviously had day-to-day.
This is when you get really Hollywood.
Kind of. I read a lot of this in E.J. Benza's voice. E's True Hollywood Scandals.
Do it as Billy Bush, though.
Okay, so like I was saying, they had a lot of day-to-day things that they did on the regular. I'm not going to cover that because the book I read, I forgot to say up top, was The Fixers, Eddie Mannix, Howard Strickling, and the MGA Publicity Machine by E.J. Flemings. That's a book that I read. They didn't really cover the day-to-day stuff, but they had a lot of day-to-day stuff to worry about. A lot of paying people off, making sure that people showed up on time, making sure that this actor or actress. One of the first jobs the two men had was covering up the reputation of silent film star Barbara Lamar, who had been arrested when she was much younger for prostitution, and she blazed a path through Hollywood of men partying and drinking. Men like Paul Byrne went mad over her. Her second husband, Lawrence Converse, was so madly in love with Lamar that he married her even though homeboy already had a wife and 3 kids. And when they arrested him for
a problem in Hollywood.
When they arrested him for bigamy, apparently he was moaning her name in his cell and banging his head against the bars until he was unconscious, dying 3 days later.
What?
A lot was that was probably drugs.
Well, love is the most powerful drug of all.
And I snort it.
Especially when you inject it.
Directly into the right vein. Lamar had an insane cocaine and morphine habit, and she was said to only sleep 2 hours a night. I forgot how they played that in the papers, but she's like, she's got so much energy, she only sleeps 2 hours a night because why waste life sleeping through it? And they're like, you're on cocaine, your nose is bleeding. Mannix and Strickling quietly committed her to the Banksia Place Sanitarium, telling the press it was over exhaustion. And when she was out, they moved her in with her father in Altadena, and the men paid a small salary and paid off her bills in exchange for her doing anti-drug interviews for the press. One of the first ones that they had to take care of. Nick Skank's wife, Norma Talmadge, was having one of her many affairs with the young actor Richard Barthelmess, who Skank greatly disliked. Of all his wife's suitors, that was the one he hated the most. Skank apparently was so irate that he asked Mannix to contact one of his mob connections to castrate Barthelmess and send his mutilated genitals to Talmadge. And the only reason that didn't happen was his wife agreed to end the affair.
Oh my God.
Probably a best move on everyone's part.
That's disgusting. Do you have pictures?
Attached and unattached. Let's see pictures.
Before and after.
Before and after, yeah.
Just so I know how weird it was before.
And because homosexuality was a crime at the time, they were constantly hiding the sexuality of their biggest stars. And they were trying to
Dish, Greg, tell me who.
Always hiding the sexuality of the actors from the public, scrambling to cover the lives of LGBT actors like William Haynes, Joan Crawford, Roman Navarro, Barbara Stanwyck by pairing them with actors of the opposite sex. Beards, if you will. They were always doing stuff like that. And these actors didn't want to hide who they were, so they were constantly out with people of the same sex. So the two guys would, they're hanging out with their friends. And look at them. They're the best friends of all time. Look at them holding hands.
Well, have I told you one time we were at an Indian restaurant and there were two men with like a baby in a stroller, and I was way too loud. I thought it was just two friends like going out with like one of them had a baby. Yeah, I was thinking like, when me and Greg, when I have a baby, I'll go out and have dinner with Greg with a baby. And I was like, look, 2 men and a baby. But it was two men that had a baby.
Yeah, they had a baby. Partners with a baby.
They could, I'm Eddie Mannix, is what I'm trying to say.
It makes me uncomfortable. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't like this line of conversation we're having. Let's go back to the mutilated genitals.
So I also read that actor William Haynes was arrested in 1926 cruising the square. That square is Pershing Square.
Okay. On the run.
Yeah, on the run. Strickling and Mannix had to cover that up. After years of emotional torment from dating Greta Garbo, actor John Gilbert, in a drunken haze, took shots at tourists parked in front of his house in Beverly Hills.
Like gunshots?
Gunshots.
Took shots at their car. Chatsworth?
The Beverly Hills of the Valley, which is Chatsworth. Mannix had to take care of the police, and MGM had to buy the tourists a new roadster. Oh, and by the way, not only was the DA, first it was Asa Keys, and after he was arrested for accepting bribes from the C.C. Julian scandal, it became Burr and Fitz. The DA was constantly, whoever the DA was in MGM's pocket, as was a good friend of Louis B. Mayer was Police Chief William Parker, and then later Jim Davis. So obviously they can cover anything up. John Gilbert continued with his obsession over Greta Garbo, and sometime later he scaled the walls of Garbo's Santa Monica hideout, and her lover tossed John Gilbert off the railing and onto the sand. The police arrested. I kind of thought that too. I read tossed.
I would pay for that experience. Yeah. Tossed into a vat of marshmallows.
Who's Greta Garbo's lover? Where does she live? And what are they? The pink marshmallows? So tossed out on the sand by her lover, her other lover. The police arrested him, and Mayer told Mannix and Strickland to teach Gilbert a lesson and not do anything to cover it up. Mannix let police handle him. Strickland let the press run the story, and Gilbert spent 10 days in jail. Although it kind of backfired a little bit because they had to bail him out like a day and a half in because all these fans and drinking buddies of John Gilbert were swarming the jail and like getting arrested just to hang out with him in jail. So like it was a big show of support when he got arrested. But this just shows like if they turn the machine off for you and they show you no love, then you just get exposed for the dirtbag that you are. So like it's almost like we're protecting our property and our investment, but also you want us backing you up if you're a dirtbag.
And this isn't the same Johnny Gilbert who does the announcements on Jeopardy.
I'm going to say no, that it's not. It's also not Gilbert Gottfried.
That was my next question.
It's also not Gilbert Grape. That was my third question, actually. But Strickling at the...
Is it Gilbert and Sullivan?
I'm going to keep going if that's okay.
Another name that's been hung up in the rafters. Gilbert.
That's true. There's no Gilberts anymore. Gilbert Hernandez, who's a cartoonist, is great.
Dilbert is my favorite cartoon and political North Star for me.
Well, what does Gilbert have to say on the matter?
Not Gilbert, Dilbert. You Dilbert.
Well, what does Gilbert have to say about it?
You dogbert.
But Strickling, at the behest of Mayer, would continue to run stories and photoplay about the crumbling relationship between John and Greta, which tortured John. This was just a way to stick the knife in him a little bit for being... I guess him and Louis B. Mayer hated each other. So just to stick it to him every once in a while, they would just run a thing about like, Garbo and John Gilbert aren't doing great. He'd be like, why? So 1927, we'll get back to Eddie Mannix now, also marks a big point in Eddie Mannix's life as he began an affair that was becoming quite serious. He hooked up with a former Ziegfeld girl, his favorite type of girl, Mary Imogene Bubbles Robertson, or as she's remembered now, Mary Nolan. Bubbles was her dancing name. Who, thanks to Mannix, was now under a contract for United Artists. Thalberg tried her for an MGM movie, but she was so messed up on drugs, she couldn't work for them.
It's like Bubbles from The Wire.
I don't know. Sure.
I only watch Marvel movies.
Yeah. If there's a hero named Bubbles, I probably know who that is, but there isn't.
Super Bubbles.
Yeah. So she was working for United Artists because she couldn't work for MGM. He was getting her work, but dating Eddie Mannix seems like a nightmare. Like Nolan had 3 abortions arranged by Mannix, which they were doing all the time for stars.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah.
Maybe not Judy Garland, but like the other young stars of the day.
He's dreaming.
Ringo's having a dream and he's slowly like coming to life, like the Thriller video. He's twitching to life.
Yeah. She had 3 abortions arranged by Mannix and was constantly trying to she had to cover up bruises and black eyes that Mannix had given her. In 1929, he tried to end it with her and she threatened to go to his wife, Bernice. So Eddie beat her unconscious, causing her to have 15 abdominal surgeries from the beatings. She then tried suing Eddie for what today is $5 million. Strickling did the best he could to belittle her public figure through the press, spilling all the nasty details that Eddie had on her. And because of these...
I have a feeling this isn't going to end well for this woman.
Better than another woman that comes up later. Because of the severity of the pain that he caused her, she started taking morphine to treat it and then obviously got hooked on it. So one night, Eddie sent some police friends over to her place and gave her the ultimatum of being arrested for drug possession or leaving town. So she left town, but she came back 10 days later.
What a good... You know what? He's not as bad as you made him out to be. He gave her the option to live.
She's not dead, just her career. But that's the kind of guy that Eddie was. He would send the police over and be like, well, you can leave town or we're going to arrest you for the morphine that you have to take because I beat the crap out of you.
It's just so weird to, when you think back of like the movie studios didn't have that much power in the city, but like they were this city.
They were. And it's crazy to think like, well, the cops were in the pocket of Hollywood. They were also in the pocket of Hollywood. The press had the police in the pocket as well.
Right.
And they
the
fought
white
for the
supremacist mayor, I'm sure, was in the pocket.
Yeah,
of somebody.
Also working under Ken
King
Perot.
They were like the little pocket I have where I put my mints in. That's the pocket the mayor was in.
I bet there was like a 3 square inch that was not corrupted.
The
in
city
the 20s.
was like a pair of cargo pants, and it was being worn by Louis B. Mayer.
It's Jinko. It's Jinko pants.
Right before he went skateboarding around his neighborhood listening to Sum 41.
Okay, so now we'll get into Joan Crawford, who, reading about her, I'm like, I can't believe. Like, it's weird reading about a person who's so revered, and then you're like, I'm reading about her life. I'm like, stop. Just stop. Just stop doing these things.
When we're doing these behind the scenes things, because mine is the same exact way where I'm like, I don't want to be doing this research because it's ruining music for me. Like, nothing I thought was what I thought it was. I don't like this episode.
Yeah, this is upsetting
Let's stop
me.
now. Let's just talk about how great Joan Crawford was.
Don't you like Mildred Pierce?
My favorite. You've seen my poster.
Let's watch Mommy Dearest. Oh, no. She did what to who? Joan Crawford has one of the biggest scandals that Mannix had to deal with. Rumors were getting louder regarding a porno that she was in when she was making movies in New York.
I don't watch that sort of thing, Greg.
But describe it to me, Rosa.
I don't watch it, but could you please draw it? Could you give me the novelization of Joan Crawford's porn?
She did this in New York in her early days when she was going under the name Billy Cassian. The rumors were true. So MGM put Mannix in charge of tracking down the negatives and destroying them.
Imagine today, like Eddie Mannix has to bring down a sex tape. Mm-hmm. That's the movie I want to see today. Eddie Mannix like breaking into YouTube headquarters. Yeah, YouTube headquarters. Breaking into internet headquarters and just
they flag every song, but you can slip a porno in by accident. It's the Pam and Tommy show that's out right now. Also had just like a 1920s Eddie Mannix. I gotta save the sanctity of the studios. Nobody will watch Baywatch if they see this woman naked knowing she has sexual intercourse.
Will you please hold my coffee while I punch this woman in the gut 15 times?
Awful man.
Bad guy.
So he had to track down this porno that Joan Crawford was in, and he did.
Did Joan Crawford want this covered up? I mean, I guess she would.
Obviously. Sorry, that was rude.
Obviously.
Yes, she did not want a porno of her getting out.
I mean, I wouldn't, but I guess it was a different time.
It's like split between 3 reels. Like you could have one reel and not know who you're watching and then be like, oh no.
When the LA Meekly sex tape gets released finally, oh boy.
Numbers are going up.
That's not all it's going.
So he tracked down the negatives and destroyed them. He found them, bought them, and burned them. Around the same time, a file...
He bought them.
He could have just killed a bunch of people.
Punched the negatives repeatedly until they moved out of they gave them the option.
Spontaneously, they combusted, quote unquote.
You can either go up in flames or you could move to Utah if you want.
Very nice. You can have as many husbands as you want. That's not how it works. Around the same time, a file on Joan Crawford's Detroit prostitution arrest that happened when she was younger went missing. A file about that arrest went missing from J. Edgar Hoover's offices. Hoover was a friend of Mayer, by the way. When she left MGM in 1943, she paid them $50,000, which many feel is hush money for covering up the existence of the tape.
J. Edgar Hoover could have used some Mannix work.
I saw the movie. Where did you get those?
That's not Joan Crawford.
So that was a big one, but Crawford caused a lot of problems. Like there's
sounds like it.
3 people that would not leave them alone and were like daily, weekly problems. She's one of them. Mount Rushmore of problems for MGM. She'd be up there. Her sexual appetite and her bisexuality was something that the men were constantly trying to squash and hide, including a long affair with Tallulah Bankhead, which she did not want to cover up. Tallulah Bankhead, when she was quitting MGM, told Mayer, "I slept with your biggest stars." Hell yeah, girl, get it. Crawford's problems...
That statement was grabbed in the middle of the air by Eddie Mannix and shoved into a garbage disposal.
Shut up. Crawford's problems were not just boning problems. In 1928, she was driving drunk down Hollywood Boulevard, weaving through traffic and running lights when she hit a woman in the crosswalk. She tried to bribe the policeman on the scene, and when that didn't work, she just drove away back to her Brentwood home and immediately called Strickling. Strickling solved the problem by driving to
follow me to Brentwood.
Yeah, no jurisdiction here.
No one ever gets convicted in Brentwood.
So Strickling solved the problem by driving to the hospital with $10,000 in cash, $100 bills, and paid the woman off.
So she didn't die. It wasn't
no, she didn't die. It wasn't a Clark Gable situation. Joan Crawford, Clark Gable, and Spencer Tracy were said to be, like I said, the biggest headaches.
Spencer Tracy? What did he do?
Oh my God, Spencer Tracy.
I guess I don't know that much about Spencer Tracy.
I won't cover it as much here, but there's a you must remember this on Spencer Tracy that literally stopped walking. I was walking and I stopped walking.
How am I going to watch Inherit the Wind after this?
We've covered some high profile, high crazy alcoholics before. We've covered like Fitzgerald and Faulkner and other people in LA history who were like fall down drunks. Spencer Tracy, I have no words for his level of alcoholism and the tirades and the temper. An insane person. Literally would have like a drink of like, oh, I'm gonna have a shot of whiskey, and would like just become insane.
Before the glass is down, he's already put down 4 ethnicities.
It's literally like Looney Tunes when you have like a little sip and then you just like
his eyes start spitting.
Yeah. Okay. Spencer Tracy. Their alcoholism, wild tempers, and sexual escapades were almost unstoppable. Like I was saying, Spencer Tracy, ungovernable, insane level king alcoholic. We've talked on this podcast before about the abhorrent behavior of Clark Gable. Loretta Young accused him of date raping her. She had a child from that, which he never met. So she went ahead and had the baby, and MGM, with the help of the fixers, covered it up. No one in the press knew she was pregnant. She had to give her child up to an orphanage for a year and then adopt it as if I did the same thing.
Awful. But like at least they didn't kill the baby. At this point, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. He also apparently impregnated writer Roger St. John's, and then they had to cover that up. And now, by the way,
who?
Roger St. John's. So I don't know who that is.
Wait, who? Roger got impregnated?
Clark Gable impregnated a writer
named Roger?
Rogers St. John's.
This is a woman?
Yeah. No, he impregnated a man.
Is this what Mr. Mom?
This is Junior, and this is that movie Junior.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, by the way, Clark Gable doing all this, he was married to 2 different women and getting into an insane affair with Joan Crawford, which required paying off blackmailers who were going to go public with what they knew about the affair.
He should have been the one living in Utah.
Clark Gable, everybody, that's him. Mannix tried to cover up a hit and run that we've talked about this before that Gable committed in 1933, killing actress Tosha Rowland. It's never been confirmed, but they say that Mannix paid John Huston, director of Maltese Falcon and The Bad Guy in Chinatown, to say that he did. Mannix and Clark, though, through all of this, best pals. And if you have Clark Gable as a best friend, you're not doing great.
Well, you can separate the man from the art and the man from the man.
You can separate the man from the humanity, for sure.
You can take the man out of Mannix.
Yeah.
But Mannix is still a man.
You almost have it. By 1930, Mannix, the street smart thug, who was now a general manager of a major motion picture studio under Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg, spends Sunday nights at Sam Goldwyn's mansion playing poker with Sid Grauman, Eddie Cantor, and the Marx Brothers. Some of his other friends were mobsters Mickey Cohen.
Where's that movie?
Some of his friends were mobsters Mickey Cohen and Jack Dragna, and the Culver City police chief and MGM, head of police for MGM, Whitney Hendry. These are all just his pals. He was also in with crooked lawyers like Jerry Geisler, who helped Errol Flynn and Charlie Chaplin get off of, Errol Flynn had rape charges, and I think Charlie Chaplin had similar charges. Not rape.
Just underage.
Underage women. Yeah, underage dating. Strictly also made a powerful friend, Billy Wilkerson, who we've talked about before, ran Zeros, and he ran Hollywood Reporter. So at the beginning of the 30s, they thought it was a huge threat to them that all of these gossip magazines were coming out, because now all of a sudden they had to put out all these other fires. But they pretty much, with Wilkerson's help, controlled the Hollywood Reporter. So they controlled like one of the biggest variety magazines.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Like every aspect of what Los Angeles was, except maybe oil, they were running it.
One place that Manning and Strickland could rely on was the House of Francis, a high-end brothel run by Lee Francis that was on the Sunset Strip. Now, I know what you're thinking, off the strip. 8439 Sunset Boulevard, right next to Ciro's, which is now the Comedy Store, was a brothel. Eventually
moved
moved
the strip in Sunset. That's why did I get that right? Is that what happens at those places?
That happens at those places. They strip. But this is where Mannix and Strickland would send sexually pent-up stars of any sexuality. If you were gay and you wanted to be with a man, they would send you to House of Francis. Yeah. They also made house calls and would frequently send sex workers over to Jean Harlow. Apparently, she would also go by House of Francis and take male customers home, according to the book The Fixers. I don't know if that's true. Many people complained about her rough sex. Yeah.
Why are these actors so horny?
I don't know. They're all
throughout
insane.
time.
Like I knew that everyone had like a little bit of shady stuff, but like,
but even today, you hear things about like every actor is like, sure, Armie Hammer likes to nibble on your flesh a little bit, but
he also probably sexually assaulted people. So that's probably number one. We should probably call that number one, because he didn't actually eat anybody, but he did sexually assault people. So House of Francis, you see an Errol Flynn, John Gilbert, Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, and many other MGM stars and studio execs and visiting clients were treated to the House of Francis by Mannix and Strickling. MGM eventually paid for a more discreet location, since this one was on the Sunset Strip.
With a big billboard pointing, Vice. And like 3 arrows coming down. Horny? Question mark?
Eat here. They basically, if I read correctly, with Lee Francis and the Fixers, with the money MGM gave them, opened up Maze, which was run by a Mae West lookalike. And it was like what you see in LA Confidential. Like they would make sex workers up to look like movie stars. And the studios actually lent Mays some actual costumes from movies to dress up their work, their catalog.
That's gross.
It's very weird. So we've covered on this podcast before the 1932 death of Paul Byrne.
You didn't say it was gross.
It's very gross.
Good.
Who would?
We got to get this episode through the Christian League, so you've got to say this stuff is gross.
Who would want someone dressed like Charlie Chaplin's tramp?
Yeah, they look like Greta Garbo, but they're dressed like Charlie Chaplin. Like they got all of the costumes mixed up in the hotel.
One time, Betty Davis went to something dressed like Groucho Marx. It's that.
I want someone with the body of Myrna Loy, but with the suit of Buster Keaton.
Enter Marlene Dietrich. But you don't even have sex with them. You just run lines with them, and they're like, "Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. I just need it. I have an audition
roller skates."
So we've covered the 1932 death of Paul Byrne, husband to Jean Harlow, who was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in Benedict Canyon. Also, Sharon Tate and Gene Seberg stayed there years later, and she might have seen a ghost and got a premonition of her own death. But that's its own episode.
Yeah. Why does it smell like the Munch Box in here?
Oh God! Imagine being attacked by Charles Manson and you just
After
smell
he just
chili,
burgers.
and he's got a chili in his beard, and he's like, you're in a stranglehold, and you just have chili over your face.
There's no doubt in my mind he had chili in his beard at least 95% of the time.
Yep, absolutely.
He was buried with
under his fingernails was chili too, and I bet like anything he touched tastes like a jalapeno.
And whenever he did that dance, you just got wafts of like chopped onions.
God, can you imagine someone like 2 feet tall, like Charles Manson, just like covered in like chili, just screaming at you?
I'm here for Sadie.
Hey man.
Sadie, are you done yet?
Oh man, is that Dennis Wilson, man? Upon finding the body of Paul Byrne, Jean Harlow made a call to Strickling before the police or paramedics were called. So on the scene were Mannix, Strickling, Irving Thalberg, and Whitey Hendry, the Culver City police chief, the guy who worked at MGM. The Fixers claimed, The Fixers, didn't know this before. The Fixers claimed that he was murdered by his common law wife, Dorothy Millette, to avoid a scandal of murder and bigamy, because he was like, they weren't technically married, but they lived together for the amount of years that makes you your wife. And then he married Jean Harlow, and she flipped a wig and apparently killed him. To avoid a scandal of murder and bigamy, the Fixers decided to call it a suicide and went ahead and created a whole story of why he committed suicide and proceeded to assassinate his character in the press to sell the lie. The newspapers were called before the police were. Mannix and the DA also choreographed the coroner's inquest just 2 days later. Millette was found dead not long after, just 10 days after, having drowned in Sacramento. She was aboard a river steamer, the Delta King, less than 24 hours after Burns turned up dead, and then she went missing from this boat. Strickling paid for her funeral and headstone and told the press that Jean Harlow insisted on paying for everything herself. Not true. Reporters still managed to look into it and found that, that Paul Byrne had a common law wife, but the lie sold to the public, and that lie still holds to this day. When I did research for that episode, Dorothy Millette did not come up. So that lie of him committing suicide because he was upset about a fight with Jean Harlow, that still like holds pretty strong, as opposed to he had another wife and she killed him.
Okay.
In 1930,
Eddie Mannix was a writer too.
Yeah, he was something of a writer. Him and Strickling was a better writer, but Mannix was probably made all the calls.
Yeah, he was good with dialogue.
He was good with dialogue, and he also like I said, like he choreographed the coroner's inquest. Like he made sure that nobody looked too much.
So he was a choreographer.
He was a choreographer. By 1933, Mayer officially put Eddie Mannix in charge of all operations at MGM. So we talked about Louis Mayer, Irving Thalberg. Eddie Mannix was like the third person on that list.
Was this just like a honorary title to make it look above board?
I think so. Well, there wasn't like his name was on checks. He had a studio,
but a way for him to get money legitimately. Yeah. It's not like someone would like, what do you think about the ending of The Wizard of Oz, Eddie Mannix?
Oh no, I'm pretty sure he had no creative input in the films.
I would hope not.
He just had to like
make it half in color.
I like it when the lion's scared, so keep being scared. I don't like a tough lion.
How about instead of a red brick road, it's a yellow brick road? And how about that munchkin over there hangs himself?
I'll help him do it. I'll get him a little stool or whatever. Yellow brick road, it's a metaphor. I like the theme of this thing for the Dust Bowl and the depressions.
As Joseph Campbell would say in a few years.
Yeah, it's the hero's journey.
He's the most educated man in Hollywood. He just knew storytelling.
Yeah, I read the Sid Field books. I get it.
Save the cat at the beginning. But me, I kill the cat when I go to someone's house.
I don't kill the cat right away. I make it suffer so it knows what it did. So yeah, he was in charge of daily operations, which was just like wrangling and making and putting out fires. But like I said, no creative input. The next year, 1934, he meets another Ziegfeld dancer, Camille Tony Lanier, and the two were immediately into each other. Apparently, he saw her on set, turned to his assistant and said, "Give her $4,500 for the day's work and have her come see me."
Oh, God. Gross.
Unfortunately, she was really into that. She was a feisty, heavy drinking, lots of sexing Irish Catholic, so she was a female Eddie Mannix.
Yeah, they called her she-bulldog. Bell dog.
Got it, Bell Dog. So by 1935, his real wife, Bernice, had had enough and quietly moved to Palm Springs. Tony moved in with Eddie, but Bernice refused to give Eddie an official divorce. He didn't need to.
Oh, no.
Because in 1937, Bernie Mannix died in Palm Springs in a car crash she was in with another man, owner of a casino down there.
And cars weren't even invented yet.
No, it was a locomotive. The papers that I read,
horse crash.
They shoot horses, don't they?
He does.
The horse wish it was shot. The papers thought that a car being towed off the side of the road may have confused the driver and he lost control. Different reports say the accident was a little bit suspicious, though. They said that there were 2 sets of tire prints in the sand off the road, and the car was scraped front to back along the side.
God.
It looked like it had been run off the road. But now nothing stopped him from marrying Toni Lanier and making her Toni Mannix. I don't know if you remember that name, but we talked about her before.
Did we?
Yeah, we did. And the two lived happily.
I don't listen to this show.
Yeah, it's just Comedy Bang Bang. Oh, then I don't listen. And then the two lived happily, open relationshipy ever after. They were in an open relationship. Now comes the most heinous cover-up, in my opinion. This is the bad. This is like the worst.
Okay.
I mean,
worse than punching a woman so much she had to get 15 surgeries.
Why compare tragedies? Why compare grief? This is a really bad one, though. This is like top dog, as they say on the last podcast and left, gold star material, which means
I don't listen to that show.
You might like it. In 1937, MGM.
Those boys, they talk too much over their history.
They're naughty.
They make a bunch of jokes about history. I don't like that.
They try to belittle tragedy. In 1937, MGM had a spectacular year with movies like Romeo and Juliet, The Great Ziegfeld.
1947?
1937. Mutiny on the Bounty, and The China Seas. MGM was going to go all out for their annual sales convention, which would be held for 5 days in Culver City in the summer of 1937. The conventioneers who arrived by train were steadily fed alcohol while women were paraded around, and it was going to be a complete bacchanal.
This is gross. Hollywood's disgusting.
Yeah, it's really gross.
You know who's going to fix this? Q.
He can't be bought. He can't be bought.
He cannot be bought.
He can't be bought. Him. JFK Jr. They're gonna
Sammy Davis Jr. too. Why not?
The ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi's gonna come in too, and they're gonna fix all this problems. They're gonna circumvent the law and get what needs to be done, and we're gonna thank them. What law? Excuse me. What law are they gonna? They're gonna do this legally? How are they gonna get us to agree? Lots of questions for those people.
Like, where do you sign up?
Like I was saying, the conventioneers steadily fed alcohol with no stops, and there were women being paraded around, except no one told the women who were not sex workers but dancers hired for the day and to hang out and perform that this was the use of them. They were earning $7.50 and a hot lunch.
We wonder why like this sort of stuff still happens, because it was like tradition.
Yeah, it's tradition, and it's the boys club thing. The boys club thing is
disgusting.
bad. The boys club thing is bad, and it's weird reading all this and being like, wow, the past is weird. And like, Harvey Weinstein's whole deal was this, and like probably every other studio exec.
No, name one more.
Walt Disney, Bob Iger,
whoever runs A24.
There's just a bunch of goats here.
It's weird. We don't know what's happening, but we know something wrong is happening.
Something wrong is happening. The goats, one of them's really mad at me. So we're going to center in the Wild West show at Roach's Ranch, Hell Roach's Ranch in Culver City. Days into the wild excursion. It was advertised as a stag affair out in the wild and woolly west where men are men. Oh, do not go to that. The women were fitted with short skirts, tight bolero jackets, leather-studded cuffs, and black boots, and were set loose into a crowd of men who were boozed up and promised the girls couldn't say no.
Ew.
So, of course, it's awful. Like, it's absolutely awful. Patricia Douglas spent most of her time trying to avoid a man named David Ross, who would not leave her alone. Ross eventually cornered her and, with the help of 2 other men, held her down and poured liquor down her throat. But she managed to get away, where she went off to the bathroom to throw up. She was later cornered again by Ross, where he sexually assaulted her inside in a car. She immediately was taken to the hospital, but it was a hospital in Culver City across the street from MGM. So it was run by a close friend of the studio. And to sum up, MGM went about covering all their tracks by getting attendees, even those who supported Douglas, into either lying about the events or staying silent. Douglas was persistent, though, and she was going to sue MGM because she wanted justice. But the fixers were built for things like this, because if the public found out that MGM MGM sponsored a week-long orgy and employed girls as party favors, the reputation of the studio would be destroyed because it was a family-friendly studio.
Yeah. And now presenting Curly Top.
Exactly. And now we're going to show you a film about the morals of
being a Christian American.
Exactly. This was their damage control. And if this was the big game, then Strictly and Max had been practicing for years for this. They hired Pinkertons to dig up dirt on her, which they didn't find anything because she was a virgin who never drank. So they got girls to lie about her. And then the actor Wallace Berry, who was there at the event and actively trying to help girls to safety.
Wallace Berry?
I'm not going to even do the line this time.
Come on, do the line.
You got to do the line. So Wallace Berry was at the event and he was actively trying to help girls. I think he even got in a fight with a guy over protecting a girl. He suddenly didn't remember anything about Douglas. And the parking attendant who saw David Ross leave the car after the assault was told by MGM he would be set up for life if he changed his story. And he suddenly was silent about the whole thing and then suddenly working as a driver for MGM, which is a job he held for the rest of his life. Hal Roach tried to get her gynecologist to say she had VD. The doctors she saw at the hospital right after claimed that he saw no evidence of intercourse. She was defamed, made to recount the traumatic event in detail in court. She was humiliated, and in the end, the lawyer who stood by her was offered an ultimatum: win this case or advance your career in politics. So he advanced his career in politics, and the grand jury refused to indict rapist David Ross. He walked free, and the MGM fixers effectively killed Patricia Douglas. None of the story was even known until 2003, when Vanity Fair did an article shortly before her death, and her story again was made into a documentary called Girl 27, which detailed the case. This was the power of the movie studio in 1937. They got away with everything, and the architect of so much misery was Eddie Mannix.
So great. I don't think he's a good guy anymore.
I think that he might be bad.
Yeah.
I think that these men might be troublesome. We'll try to wrap up the story quick with a story we've talked about before. Tony Mannix, George Reeves, and Eddie. By all accounts...
I do not remember this.
Okay. By all accounts, the relationship between Tony Mannix and George Reeves, the Superman actor she fell in love with, was totally fine with Eddie because he had his own affair going on with the Japanese woman posing as a housemaid. The four even went on...
I already kind of see where this story's going, and I don't like this.
The four even went on vacation together.
Oh, no.
Eddie gave Tony money.
There weren't animals involved, were there?
It's an A24 party. Eddie gave Tony money, and Tony spent the money on things for George because she was obsessed with George Reeves, like a car and a house in Benedict Canyon, but nothing could make him happy. He was depressed and hated playing Superman, but that's all people wanted to see him as. But there was something that could make George happy, and that was Leonore Lemon, a woman he met in New York and was instantly smitten over.
I said animals. I'm thinking of the wrong Superman Reeves. I was thinking of Christopher Reeves.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like Eddie Mannix paid the horse to throw him or something. Anyway, wrong Superman. Keep going.
He fed him a steady stream of carrots for the rest of his life. No,
or do you want to go race at Santa Anita?
You want to visit the glue factory or Santa Anita? Which one is it? So he falls in love with another woman, Leonore Lemon. So he gets back to LA and he breaks it off with Tony and moved Leonore into the Benedict Canyon home that Tony bought for him with Eddie's money. Tony was obsessed over George, and if you remember, George was mysteriously almost run off the road twice, as well as having his brakes on his car cut, and his beloved dog went missing from his car one day. In 1959, depressed while his girlfriend was partying downstairs, George killed himself in that home. Or did he? Witness reports were confusing, and police found 2 extra bullet holes in the carpet. His death is another mystery that's tied to Eddie Mannix.
And these things will never, ever be solved.
Nope. Because the cover-up was done so good. You know, the right people lied the right amount of times and things were covered up and paid off.
Well, when you have the police covering it up for you, you're never going to get to the truth.
You're never going to get to it. And now...
But that's where we come in. Let's go break into a bunch of houses in Benedict Canyon and look at the floor.
But now, like, it's so covered by time. There's no way to... Yeah, you're right. Like, we'll never know because they did such a good cover-up job.
Like, those houses probably don't even... I'm talking about it as if it's still a crime scene. Like, we can't go there and see, like, oh, wait a minute, there's a footstep in the garden.
There's a 100-year-old bullet hole. So by this time, Eddie was on his way out. His health deteriorated, obviously, the way he lived through the 50s. And now in the early 60s, he was practically invalid. He died of a massive heart attack in 1963. Tony Mannix died in the 8. Good. I wish that he could die another 10
I wish
times.
It could have been more than massive.
I wish he had to live in the moment of that massive heart attack.
Nuclear heart
attack, and it sort of never ended. He's just
40-year
constant, a 40-year heart attack.
It's like the person who gets hiccups for like 3 years.
Yeah. Tony Mannix died in the 80s watching reruns of Superman into her later years. That's how obsessed she was.
Wow.
MGM was essentially...
that's how I'm going to go out too, but even though I got it mixed up with the other Superman, but still.
The better Superman. MGM was essentially crushed by this point, the 60s, having lost the battle to message films by like people like Dory Sherry, who I think replaced Louis B. Mayer, and television. They could not predict the power of television, and they were just like, let's fight it. Let's not try to join in and make a TV show. Let's just fight it. The crimes
Eddie Mannix covered up from the Brady Bunch family. Oh my God. And the Partridge family. Oof.
Cannot keep that Danny Bonaducci in line. In 1969, a former MGM handyman turned millionaire Kirk Cobain purchased a lot and sold most of it off to buy the MGM casino in Vegas. In 1970, at a stockholders meeting, Kevorkian, his handpicked president, announced that half of the remaining MGM staff would be fired. Most of the larger films in production were canceled, and the foreign and music divisions were sold off. Almost everything was sold off, and the old Hollywood dynasties pretty much all died off. And that's the end of all of that.
And Hollywood
mess.
was fixed forever.